over the past year, students had to get used to screens a lot like this. Amid the coronavirus pandemic across the country, students had to shift to online learning, and that was no different at Seton Hall. Hi, I'm Christian Gardner. I'm here to take an in-depth look into the struggles of going to school amid a historic pandemic. I caught up with a few students sharing their thoughts about how the fall semester went and the challenges they faced going to school online or in person from August all the way to December with no breaks in between.
Going into the semester, to be completely honest, I was kind of nervous. I wasn't sure what campus would look like, what it would be like, how they would go about things. Announcing the high flex plan so early, that was nice to give everyone like an opportunity to adapt.
I think that getting the opportunity to go in person was amazing, and I'm like really thankful for that because a lot of other college students didn't get to have that.
Around the country, so many schools decided to not have a fall break or anything like that. And how do you feel that affected your education or your time at Seton Hall in this fall semester? Mia or John, would you want to jump in about that?
Sure. I felt like it made me a little bit like more stressed and tired, especially like coming from like the bio major, because like we always have to do stuff like all majors have to, of course. And like they kept giving us like more assignments that and like their standards for us were like even higher than like usual, it felt like, and giving even more assignments. So not having that break really was a big deal, at least amongst like my fellow people in my major.
A big reason that this semester felt particularly bad was like burnout, because we've been just on a laptop or computer the whole semester. There really was no break from the screen. There was no break. I mean, unless you're in person classes, but even then, sometimes some professors preferred you to have your laptop out so you can be on Teams at the same time as in class. And like the burnout just felt awful. Like these last few weeks, hitting finals, I didn't even want to like look at my computer when I woke up. I would wake up and I would like take as long as I could to get breakfast and shower and get ready so that I didn't have to be on my computer for so long some days.
Like in a few of my classes, not all of them, I struggle to like really retain information online. I think that I have like a really bad attention span, so like sitting in front of the computer, like it's so easy to just like turn and do something else or try and multitask, which ultimately takes its toll on learning.
You have a very unique perspective coming as a PA, and for a lot of the new coming Pirates, what were some of the questions they kept on coming to you about, and how were you able to encourage students to get involved this semester in such a very unique semester?
I always get interesting questions as a PA, but this semester I had questions I know the answers to, and I think that was something that was very important to establish early on. I don't know the answers, and neither do the people above. So some of the questions that I was asked, like how long is this semester going to be? I think that was going to be the biggest question that was asked throughout. And you just have to balance it and say, we're trying our best. Make sure you follow the Seton Hall pledge, and we'll do the best we can just to make it through. And all things considered, I thought that we would be sent home October 1st. We made it almost till the end, so that was very impressive.
One area where I felt it was affected was like with labs, because like kinesthetic learners, for example, like people who need to like move in order to like learn, they were really impacted. I like that supplements my learning. I'm also visual, so like in labs we weren't able to do anything really. If you were even had the opportunity to go in person, you were just sitting there and like kind of listening, so it almost like defeated the purpose. Like they did their best, of course, given the circumstances, but you lost out on that movement. And also with like RP now, I don't know if like you guys had to use it as well, but it's like the online like proctoring. And if you have like a question during like your test and need clarification, you can't ask anybody, you're on your own. And like I personally need that like sometimes to get that clarification. So in those ways I was really impacted. So it made me more stressed basically.
Going off of that, how do you feel this semester you had to change personally as a student?
I kind of mentioned this earlier, but I definitely had to take more responsibility as a student. Like I couldn't rely on my professors to teach me everything that I needed to know. there were times where I would sit and like have to go reread things and like take that into my own hands at times, even though professors were so accommodating and everything. But I think I definitely grew as a learner in that aspect.
I can never focus when I'm in my own room, bedroom at home, or in the dorm when I was there on campus. It was really hard for me to focus in my room, so I would have to adapt. And usually I'll go to the library alone or with friends, like in the past semesters. But the library was restricted, and most on-campus places were restricted, so it was kind of hard. Like I would go to the Cove and do work, but even then, just the big plexiglass screen or the plastic screen that they had up, and other factors just made it feel weird, and it just wasn't a great environment for learning. And I know the school, did the most that they could for the most part in trying to accommodate for us. But a lot of the times it just felt like I had nowhere to go to focus for doing work. And I did the best I could, but I had to adjust to that, to being able to try to hunker down and just study and do work in my own room, even though I haven't been able to in the past. And I think I've made some improvements in that.
I also had the chance to talk with Dr. Priti Shah earlier in the year, who is the Associate Director at CAPS, the Counseling and Psychological Services at Seton Hall, to help shed a little light on what students and faculty can be dealing with mentally during this time and how to best combat it.
I was talking to our director, Dr. Aguero Trotter, and she mentioned, after running some statistics, that that we're seeing about an 11% increase in overall clinical services from this time last year. I think people's mental health concerns are more complicated or intensified because of COVID and the other pandemics going on in the world, whether it's racial trauma and racial violence, election stress, economic stress. I think we also have to remember that some students might have lost someone close to them due to COVID.
So how would you say is the best way to navigate through that stress that comes with a pandemic and, of course, all the different other things that you brought up?
Yeah, so maybe it's helpful to kind of just take a step back and just kind of define what stress is, right? I know we feel it a lot, but stress, just from a psychological perspective, is defined by one's perception of a threat versus one's perception of their ability to cope. And I think part of the issue right now is that we're experiencing and exposed to many quote unquote threats, right? COVID, racial violence, political unrest, economic concerns, and like we talked about, for a prolonged period of time. And then at the same time, students might be removed from some of their normal ways of coping. And so over a prolonged period of time that's chronic, I think this is truly exhausting. And at the same time, I think we're all having a normal response to an abnormal series of events, like in this case, the pandemic. So everything we're experiencing, even though it's really distressing, is a somewhat normal response to disaster, right? So you asked about ways that we can kind of fight this. There's a lot that we can do. I think whenever there's a major disaster, we need to create some semblance of normalcy in our lives. So maintaining sleeping, eating, and exercise routines is really vital. I think sometimes students estimate how important that is, or people in general underestimate how important that is just for energy and mood regulation. Some students report not feeling as tired at night and having difficulty sleeping. And I think this might actually be part of having less activity, right? Because you're not walking to classes as much, you're not going out as much. It may feel boring. So having a exercise routine is really helpful. It releases endorphins and it can regulate stress and relieve tension. It sounds simple, but also talking, right? Saying how you feel and expressing it to others, even in the conversation that you had amongst some of your friends, letting it out and realizing that you're not alone can be really helpful. Our feelings don't go away just because we ignore them. Sometimes people journal also as a way of expressing their feelings. I think using your support systems, whoever they might be, or a chat line or a hotline, and just finding creative ways to stay connected in general, I think can be really, really helpful. It can create some normalcy, right? And some excitement in a routine that might otherwise feel sad or monotonous. I do hear from students, I know most students use texting, and there's nothing wrong with that, but also don't underestimate the power of actually hearing someone's voice, or better yet, video chatting, just to see people's faces. The other thing I think is just trying to be compassionate to yourselves and others, reminding yourself that you and others are doing the best you can do under a very stressful and abnormal set of circumstances, trying to incorporate self-care in your routine. I know you were talking about the fall break earlier, and while there might not be like this break that's imposed by the university, it doesn't mean that you can't and shouldn't create some breaks for yourself, right, to just help you decompress.
For people that there are times that they feel that they're unmotivated by the work that they need to do in schoolwork amid the pandemic, why do you think that is, and how do we best overcome that?
Yeah. So again, I'm going to say, part of that is creating some sense of normalcy. I have heard from students that, it is hard to stay motivated. And, I think we have to recognize that there are different types of learners, right? Some are visual, some are auditory learners, some need to be in the classroom environment to focus better or feel the discussion is more organic in person, and that therefore creates a better learning environment. And then on the flip side, I actually think there's some who might be thriving in the online classroom environment. So I think motivation is hard to maintain because one's normal ways of working, studying, staying motivated have completely changed, right? And again, the chronic nature of this stress is probably overwhelming, and it can cause people to feel a little helpless and avoid certain aspects of schoolwork and lose motivation. I do suggest a couple of specific things to combat this, especially around academic motivation. I notice a lot of students don't turn on their video in classes. At least this is what I've heard. I think if you want a more normal class experience, students may want to consider getting ready in the morning, getting dressed, sitting in a particular place for their classes each day, setting aside a space where they're going to actually do work, especially if they're at home or in their dorm rooms. If that's hard to come by, reserving a private classroom online is something that students can do. Again, I think this just creates an academic and psychological environment that would increase focus and motivation. It makes you feel like you're there even though you're not, or at least creates a little bit of normalcy. Have times in your day, this is part of routine, to do schoolwork. For students who I notice are navigating the semester a little bit well, I notice that they do that, and I think that's important. Because in this environment, in an online environment, it's really easy to feel like there's like very little boundaries between school, work, and other parts of your life. And I think also if you're starting to feel overwhelmed, something I suggest is kind of break the tasks down. So sometimes students might think to themselves like, okay, I have a huge paper to write, it's due in 2 days. And thinking about the fact that you have a huge paper to write is going to be overwhelming. But maybe if you break that task down and say, okay, I'm going to write the introduction today, or I'm going to write the paragraph today, right now, that creates a little bit of momentum because it's something that's doable, right? And then once students get started on that smaller task that they're able to do, sometimes people feel more energized or more motivated. And again, try to take breaks, get off screen in between classes to rest your eyes, because I know that screen fatigue is real too. Look out the window, get some fresh air, listen to music. I think all of those things can kind of help build up energy and build motivation.
Now, some of the terms that we keep hearing often is this phrase of COVID fatigue and seasonal depression. So can you talk about what that is and what people may be going through during this time?
Sure. So I guess one thing I wanted to clarify, so there's not really a known psychological disorder called COVID fatigue. But I don't want that to invalidate what anyone is feeling, because I think everyone is feeling this and experiencing this. It is very real. So as I understand it, people are using the term COVID fatigue to describe this exhaustion, monotony, loneliness, anxiety, stress, sadness, right? Fear, sometimes panic, sometimes disbelief or detachment. And it's more of a psychological and emotional state, which is different from a psychological diagnosis or disorder. And as we talked about, I think it's a normal response to, traumatic and abnormal events that are occurring right now. And so, I know that doesn't necessarily take away from how it feels, but it is sort of a normal response to the pandemic in many ways. Different from seasonal affective disorder, right? Seasonal affective disorder is actually a recognized psychological disorder. It's included in the DSM-5, which is a listing of all the psychiatric disorders that exist. It's considered to be a type of depression. It's actually called major depressive disorder with seasonal pattern. And people who have seasonal affective disorder experience mood changes that are very similar to symptoms of depression. And they usually occur around the fall or winter months when there's less sunlight. So it's associated with, or they believe it's associated with, like a chemical or a biochemical imbalance in the brain that's prompted by shorter daylight hours and less sunlight in the winter. And so some of the treatment could involve light therapy. There's actually certain lamps that are called light therapy lamps that you can buy online and have them in your room to create that type of light that helps with regulating the chemicals in our body to help with seasonal affective disorder. Obviously, talk therapy and talking through some of your feelings is really helpful. For some, maybe antidepressant medication. I do think it's important that the symptoms will generally improve over time, but sometimes these symptoms can improve more quickly with treatment.
What are some of the best ways to kind of cope with the stress amid the pandemic and trying to fight that COVID fatigue? And if with the sun setting at 3:30 now in New York City, how to best deal with seasonal depression?
Sure. Well, some of it is what we talked about earlier, right? Kind of trying to create some normalcy in our lives, right? Whatever that might mean, maintaining routines, using your supports, trying to be compassionate to yourselves and others, incorporating self-care. I do think using mindfulness is really helpful. So mindfulness is about staying in the present moment. A lot of times we create a lot of misery and anxiety when we project into the future or ruminate about the past, right? And it's normal to do that. I'm sure people are thinking about what they did at this time last year, and it creates a sad feeling, or are fearful about the future. But for now, if you can take it just day by day, I think it's really helpful. So you can start your day with a mindfulness meditation, focus on your breathing, look around at the scenery, get outside. You mentioned, the sun setting very early. If there's a way to get outside, even just sticking your head out the window or something like that, just to get some fresh air and really take in the scenery, or go for a mindful walk, which means you're walking, but you're really paying attention to the five senses, right? You're looking at what you see, what you hear, what you can feel in the moment. Even doing like a crossword puzzle, all of these things keep your mind present focused, and can really help with lowering stress in general. I think with the pandemic, because it's been chronic, the other thing that's found to be really helpful is gratitude and appreciation. And I know that might be really hard to do right now, but for a lot of students, if you start creating like a gratitude journal and try to consider what you might appreciate or be thankful for each day, it can really help increase your mood, right? There's a field called positive psychology, which is the study of what makes us happy. And people who practice positive psychology talk about how gratitude, along with mindfulness and compassion, really helps build perspective and resilience, which I think helps amidst a pandemic and really helps lower stress and anxiety. This might go without saying, but I think limiting our exposure to news media can be scary to see numbers increase or certain images on TV that are traumatic. Try to limit the time of day. You want to stay informed and connected, but you might also want to just limit that time too. I guess one other thing that I think is helpful also, again, it might be hard to do because I understand students, are taxed on time too, but we're a university where service to others is highlighted in our mission, but it actually makes people feel good to do something for others. So if you're capable, and of course you want to do it in a healthy way, if there's ways to volunteer in your community, or just even a random act of kindness for yourself or someone else, it actually really does make people feel better. And I think overall it can help strengthen the community during this time.
You talked a lot about trying to create a routine for yourself. And I think this period has been so uncertain for a lot of people. So how do you think people can best try to stay present within the moment and try to go through life in such an unpredictable time?
Yeah. Well, I think when it's so unpredictable, we have to try to focus on the small things we can control, right? We can't control that this pandemic exists, but we can control how we think about it. We can control our routine, the activities we fill our days with, how we go about our activities, what we eat, when we go to sleep, the people that we talk to, how we talk to them, how we see them. And again, these things might seem small, but they actually make a huge difference, because then we're focused on the very things we have a lot of control over, right? And that's what helps build some sense of security and normalcy in our day-to-day lives, right? Even amidst a pandemic, right? We know if you have like a schedule routine that you follow, you know you're probably going to eat at 12, and then maybe you have a break and you're going to get coffee with a friend, right? If you know that's going to happen today, that can, again, just help people feel a little bit better amidst some of the uncertainty that does exist. I think the other thing, and I know this might feel a little hard to hear for students, but I think it's honest. I think the best way we can prepare for uncertainty is by accepting that it is a part of life, right? And also take pride in and learn to appreciate yourselves each day that you're able to get through it. You know, absolute uncertainty doesn't actually exist, but it's a very human condition to want to create that sense of security, right? And there's nothing wrong with that, and it's really a normal thing to do, and it's a helpful thing to do. And so that's why that routine amidst completely abnormal set of events really makes a big difference.
Thank you once again to Dr. Shah. Those are some great resources, especially as we move towards the winter and spring semesters as students and faculty return back to Seton Hall. Overall, huge thank you to CAPS and their help in this video. They're a great place for students and faculty here at Seton Hall. If you need anyone to talk to, please reach out to them. I want to say one last thank you to all the students I got to talk with for this one. I'm really proud of what they're able to do this semester, as we all know it was a struggle. And this is such a stressful time for everyone. So make sure that you take care of yourself and your mental health. So I want to say thank you so much for staying with me and watching this video and supporting Pirate TV. But that's going to do it for Christian Gardner. I'll see you next time. Stay safe, wear a mask, have a great day.